find a world of magic. Come along, we can make the world your friend. Silver ball in the air, see it glow everywhere. Nickelodeon, Nickelodeon, here we go,
Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of Casual Chats. I'm doing a very special month in December discussing about Nickelodeon in honor of its 40th anniversary with the debut of Pinwheel. And we are doing our first week. We have a very special guest with us. We interviewed her on the blog 5 years ago, if you can believe it. She is the runner of the classic Nickelodeon fan blog, where she discusses about 70s and 80s Nickelodeon, which would be appropriate for this particular topic. So we have Peggy Sue Clay.
Hello, thank you.
We've already introduced you on our blog over 5 years ago, but maybe for our new listeners who probably don't know, why don't you give an introduction on who you are and what kind of blog that you run?
All right, thank you. I can't believe it's been 5 years, my goodness.
I know, it's crazy.
I just looked it up today and saw the date and thought, oh, wow. A lot's happened in 5 years. My blog is called the Classic Nickelodeon Fan Blog, and basically I discuss 70s and 80s Nickelodeon, the very early stuff. I graduated high school in 1987, so that's kind of my cutoff. When you graduate high school and you grow up and you go off into life, and there you go. So my blog is about all the stuff, the late 70s, the very early 80s. All the stuff that not too many people remember, actually.
Yeah. So, it's funny because the day that I'm going to be posting this podcast is December 1st. And December 1st just so happens to be the 40th anniversary of Nickelodeon and when Pinwheel first got started. So, it's just crazy to believe that it's been that long since, it started off humbly as a local television cable network in Columbus, Ohio, and then eventually just branched out into being the number one kids network that a lot of people know about today. So, in your earliest memories, what can you tell us about, the early years of Nickelodeon?
Well, I was reading back over that interview from before. Actually, that the logo, where it's kind of a cream color background and it says Nickelodeon, and it has the little man looking into the N as if looking into a Nickelodeon. I actually remember that first logo. I can remember watching America Goes Bananas with the host was Randy Hamilton, and some of the Teresa Brewer song Music played. And so those very, very first old few commercials, I remember those. I can remember watching The Adventures of Black Beauty. I watched Livewire, Vegetable Soup, Spread Your Wings, which is a program that never, ever gets mentioned anywhere. I would love to find footage of that. Studio C, all those great old programs. What Will You Think of Next, which a lot of us still called Science International. Programs like that.
Yeah, and speaking of which, speaking of that very first logo, the person who created the logo, Joseph Voz, you interviewed him on your blog a few years ago.
That was so long ago, I don't even remember that.
Yeah,
wow.
I know. Yeah, I know. When you've interviewed so many people on your blog or podcast or whatever, it's kind of hard to keep track. I can understand that. But yeah, that's amazing, considering that not only was he the one who created the first Nickelodeon logo, but he was also the one who came up with the name itself.
I remember reading that somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, so for anybody who's interested, so It was originally called the Pinwheel Network, obviously, because that was where Pinwheel was their main program that ran on that channel. Runs for 6-hour marathons. Then around 1979 was when they decided to make a change into branching out with different programs. And Joseph Voz created the very first logo, and he also came up with the name Nickelodeon. And there were also, it wasn't the first name that they wanted to choose though. It was either going to be called either the Sunshine Channel or the Rainbow Network.
Yeah, I read that. That's pretty hard to believe, huh?
Yeah, and the reason why, so Nickelodeon, for those who are younger listeners who don't know, probably a lot younger, like even younger, even we're not even old enough to know about this, but around the 1920s and 30s, there used to be like these little theaters called Nickelodeon in which you can be able to watch like short little films. Even as time went on, they even had like the little portable ones where you had to turn the crank. I was at the Museum of Moving Image about a month ago in New York, and I actually did see one, and they had like little tiny condensed versions of King Kong and a bunch of other classic movies from like the 20s and 30s. So the name Nickelodeon derives from nickel, which was about 5 cents to see one of those little movies, and Odeon, which is Greek for theater. And so that was where the first logo came about, in which the guy dressed in black and white would be looking at the N of Nickelodeon like that little small machine. So yeah, how did you get a hold of Joseph Voz? Because I remember I wanted to get a hold of him years ago, but I just didn't have the chance to. I think that maybe his website wasn't up at the time. I wanted to see if I can get a hold of him for my blog, but I never did. But yeah, how did you get a hold of him?
Honestly, I don't even remember. Who did I do it, or did Andy do it? Because I know a gentleman by the name of Andy Anderson who follows the blog and all of the pages and groups on Facebook, contacted me and said, I got a hold of Cece Loveheart, who was the very first Coco from Pinwheel, and he sent her about 6 little questions, and she answered them and sent it back to him. So was it one of Andy's interviews? And he just did that as a favor to me.
Maybe it was. I think I did remember seeing that name. So maybe it was Andy. So for that, I apologize. Shout out to Andy for the interviews.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, Andy. So he was the one who did some of those interviews. So was he like a member of the blog, or was he a person who just was a fan of classic Nickelodeon as much as you were?
No, he is just a fan like I am. He did that as a favor to me and surprised me with it. I give him full credit for those. Absolutely.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, yeah, it's 5 years ago we had you on the blog discussing about classic Nickelodeon in a time in which it wasn't really as well known. I think nowadays, like many years later, it's been blossoming like crazy. I cannot tell you, there's a lot more videos on Pinwheel now. Like seriously, like 5 years ago when I did my Nickelodeon tribute for the first time, I could barely find like 2 minutes of it. Now I can find like 6-hour marathons, just like it was back in the 80s. There's a lot more better quality videos of You Can't Do That on Television since they released it on iTunes. There's more availability with fun facts about all these shows that came out. More interviews from the people who were involved with the shows. So I think that it is definitely a lot more well known now than it was when when I was starting Old School Lane.
I agree. I've noticed several more videos online. You're talking about the Pinwheel. I also noticed just recently that Matt and Jenny is now on YouTube, and I have found a whole season of Vegetable Soup on YouTube. For anyone who would like to go and check those out, those are awesome shows. And they're very much needed in today's society and today's life. Those are good programs for kids to go and watch. Take your kids, say, hey, I used to watch this when I was young. I want you to watch it with me.
Yeah, definitely. I think that with people, with the younger people watching the stuff that you grew up with, they build an appreciation towards it. Like, this is what we had when we were younger, and I want to share this with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So another thing that I want to mention to you is I want to give you a congratulations, because I heard that you were actually interviewed for the Orange Years documentary.
Well, that is still coming up. That is still on the books. I live in the southwest corner of Oklahoma, and they are all the way down in Texas. We're about 8 hours away from each other, and so we're trying to meet up. But I was asked, and that is coming up. I just don't know exactly when that is, and I'm very, very excited for that.
How did you get called to do that?
Well, I asked. Scott is the one who reached out to me. Well, they were sending me. We were playing tag with emails for a long time, and finally we exchanged phone numbers. And I said, "How did you even hear about my blog?" He told me you told him.
I did, actually.
So thank you to you.
Yes, I think it was like last year when their Kickstarter was just popping up. And they were talking about, we're going to be talking about Nickelodeon and its origins, and we're going to be interviewing all these people. And I was like, if you want to know about that, then you should reach Peggy Sue Clay. She's the expert in this. And I guess, I guess history was made, I suppose. But yeah, I just spoke to Scott. I'm sorry, what you said?
I said you gave me chills while you were saying that. Thank you so much.
No, it's very appreciative that that Scott would take my word for it. It was just a little offhanded thing that I just said. I was just helping. I know that Scott and his partner were just starting the Kickstarter, and they were giving advertisements and videos, spreading the word about their documentary. And I remember that when I talked to them, and all the stuff that they wanted to cover that really hasn't been covered on a documentary before, I was like, there's a whole bunch of things you could learn from Peggy, because she's been doing this for a long time. She started the classic Nickelodeon blog for when was it again? Like around 2010 or 20.
I started the blog in 2009, but that actually grew out of my Yahoo group. Back in the olden and the ancient of days of 2007, so ancient now, I actually started I had a partner. We started a Yahoo group called A New Beginning for Classic Nickelodeon, and he got busy with life, and so I took it over full time. And we were very, you can go back and look at it. We were very, very active. And about 2 years later, I said, there's got to be more people out there. I want to see if I can start a blog. And so I looked around and I found Blogspot, and I fit them and they fit me. And I started posting. Didn't really know what I was doing until I got on a regular posting schedule. I don't know if you keep up with do you keep up with the blogs at all?
Yeah, I do.
These days, or are you busy? So on Saturdays, I post a classic Nickelodeon, classic Nick Rocks, and that is my tribute to Nick Rocks Video to Go. I post about 5 80s videos. I try to mix a little of everything, some Spanish music and a little bit of country and a little bit of Christian and different things people may not have seen before. For the holidays, I kind of do more holiday related. On Wednesdays, I go back and forth between special deliveries. Like Nickelodeon used to post the special deliveries. I post a lot of them I have found online. I'm able to post. But then I throw in fun things like Sha Na Na concert or the life and times of Grizzly Adams. The point of my blog is not only to celebrate Nickelodeon, but I want to make it family friendly, to where if a young child logged into my blog, they could watch those videos because they're clean and they're friendly.
Yeah, that's actually really good, considering that just like we were mentioning before about introducing the younger kids to what people grew up with back then. It's nice that it showcases that stuff is still pretty safe for the kids of today to watch.
Absolutely. And I think that's really important. I think that's really needed. So.
Yeah. So, discussing about where we've come in the 5 years that we've talked briefly on and off, and going on to now since then. I think that the history and the fascination of Nickelodeon has flourished. We have obviously Slimed, we have the Orange Years, and there's been a whole bunch of one-off documentaries here and there. I mean, back then we only had You Can't Do That on Film, which was the You Can't Do That on Television documentary. But now we actually have a lot more books and upcoming documentaries and shows celebrating what Nickelodeon was back in the day. And a lot of people are fascinated about what the history was, that once upon a time, before Nicktoons and before live action shows and stuff like that, Nickelodeon was all about education. It was all about that, Dr. Vivian Horner, who worked on the Electric Company, which was a PBS show very similar to Sesame Street, wanted to have a channel dedicated to showing educational programs all the time for kids, and it was basically a little bit more variety for those who couldn't have PBS. So then eventually, as time went on, we would have more variety shows, we would have more cartoons, and then it just pretty much just grew and blossomed from there. And looking back on the 70s and 80s Nickelodeon stuff, it's actually pretty interesting, considering that a lot of the shows being acquired like from other countries back then. I think that we didn't really have that much in the sense of this came from this country, this came from that country, or whatever. Nowadays we do. It's pretty apparent that you can watch something like the BBC, or you can watch something like a Korean soap opera on Netflix. Like my sister and I, we watched one like a few months ago, and you couldn't have that back then. Anime is another example. So back in the 80s, when you had Danger Mouse and Count Duckula and various Canadian shows like What Will You Think of Next or Science International, now it's kind of crazy that Nickelodeon could do something like that in a time at which it was really rare.
I agree. They were very good about bringing in those imports. Somebody just asked me the other day, we were discussing some of the shows from different countries. We were kind of focusing in on Canada because of a research project I'm helping these kids online with. But, they had Canada brought in Today's Special, You Can't Do That on Television, Adventures in Rainbow Country. And then you had, from Great Britain, we had The Tomorrow People, which was actually ITV's counter to the BBC's Doctor Who. It's absolutely fascinating. A long time ago, I wanted to write a book about Nickelodeon, and I still have it in the back of my head, and one of the chapters was going to be called The British Are Coming, and So Is Everyone Else. And it was going to highlight all of these different shows from all these different countries, including the Pinwheel cartoons that were all from different countries as well.
I think you should go for it.
It's still in the back of my head. I am a writer. I'm a trained writer. I'm not paid yet. One day that's going to change, but I definitely want to. I'm going to include things like the interview I did with George James and some of the other things as well.
Yeah, I think that would be really fascinating because, with Slimed and with the upcoming Orange Years, they're going to be focusing on mid to late 80s and early 90s Nickelodeon, which, not to be fair, that's perfectly fine, but the fact that, somebody would be covering late 70s, early 80s Nickelodeon, I don't think has been done before. I mean, sure, we've had Nickelodeon Nation, but that was more for covering about how it became like a corporate conglomerate as we know it, and very similar, there's another Nickelodeon book which talks about like the advertisement and the merchandise that came out of it that made Nickelodeon a marketable network that it is today. But yeah, there hasn't really been like a history of Nickelodeon focusing on the era before You Can't Do That on Television or Double Dare. So yeah, that should be really interesting. If you ever have a chance to do that in the future, I'd love to have you back and we can talk more about it.
Definitely. I think I think the time is right. There is certainly a lot of nostalgia now with Nickelodeon. As you said, 5 years ago, we didn't have that. Matt's got his book out now, and, Nickelodeon Nation's been out for a long time. I can't get past the first chapter because I keep trying to take notes on it. I'm a note taker. But, and now you guys have certainly done a lot with your blog and with your videos, and now Scott and Adam are going to be doing the Orange Years. The time is right. I actually would like to do a convention myself, but I still have a lot to put together. I've got people that I need to talk to, but I already have some stars interested in coming down for it. So I've just got to put the pieces together now.
Well, that sounds great, actually. I've known, there's been a lot of, it's not, I've always wanted to go to a convention dedicated to Nickelodeon. I'm surprised that it hasn't happened yet. There's comic book conventions, there's video game conventions, there's anime conventions, there's conventions about Star Trek and Star Wars and what have you, but there hasn't been one on Nickelodeon, which I'm kind of surprised. Sure, we have San Diego Comic-Con and New York City Comic-Con, but those are like sections. They're not like fully dedicated. So I think that'll be really cool if, you had like panels and merchandise, people coming in for interviews. So I think that'll be fantastic once again. And, I'd love to, when you get that going, I'd love to, show up as, maybe I'll fly to Oklahoma and just look around and see all the people there and just mingle with all the fans, because I think that'll be a lot of fun.
Well, that's the, as of right now, I haven't talked to the people that I want to go and talk to with the city. But that's exactly the point that I want to say to them. No one has ever done this before. The time is right. I've got a poster that I put together that I'm going to take in with me and tell them exactly what you just said. No one's ever done it. This will be good for the city, and just pitch it like that, and let's pray and go for it.
Yeah, there you go. And hey, it all started with a thought and an idea that I want to see if I can pull this off. And you did that when you wanted to branch out your little Yahoo club thing, your Yahoo group, and you did the blog. And then eventually, as time went on, now people are starting to notice you more, especially with, Scott and Adam with the Orange Years. And now with people getting more access to all these shows that they couldn't, the 5 years ago that we talked. I think that now as a parent that this stuff should be more focused and should be more featured than ever before.
I agree. It's very exciting for me. My blog just reached over 100,000 views.
That's fantastic.
And it's growing. As of the start of this interview, it has reached, for like 44 views, 45 views, something like that, just today.
Wow.
It's so exciting, and I never knew it would get to this. And I'm very thankful to everyone who's following me. I'm going to cry, but everyone who's commented and paid attention to it, and thank you, everyone, so much.
Well, thank you for everything, Peggy Sue. I'm glad that now your stuff is getting more recognized, as it should have been. Your stuff has always been amazing, and you have always presented your facts in a very unique way that nobody's ever done before. So all the attention that you're getting, you truly deserve it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right.
You're going to make me...
It's okay. It's okay. But yeah, I think that we can end it here. So once again, Peggy Sue, thank you so much for coming on by. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for asking me. It's such an honor. I've listened to so many of your interviews. You are such a skilled interviewer. I'm better with writing. That's why I have a blog. So I'm very impressed with you guys as well. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Oh, thank you. That should be it, everybody. Let us know in the comments below about your earliest memories of 70s and 80s Nickelodeon. Let us know if you have seen Peggy Sue's blog, and if you haven't, go check it out. And hopefully all the stuff that is coming up for Peggy Sue, whether it be her interview with the Orange Years or her possible book or possible Nickelodeon Convention, definitely when those stuff is announced, then we'll definitely let you guys know, and maybe we'll have Peggy Sue back. So yeah, next time we'll be having another special guest discussing about Nickelodeon. Who's it going to be? Well, you have to find out. So thank you so much for listening. Hope to see you around soon, and take care.
It doesn't matter where you are, when Nickelodeon land, you are better off by far. Nickelodeon.